Hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of That Early Childhood Nerd. I'm Heather Burnt-Santy, and this morning I've got Mike Huber here.
Hello.
That's Mike.
Yeah, it's me.
Those of you who are listening won't be able to see that he's got a cool whole t-shirt on.
Oh, yeah.
There it is.
Live through this.
Lovely. So Mike and I are going to talk about cognitive dissonance and how it results in emotional distress.
Yeah, and I don't have a quote for you because I'm in the middle of writing the article. So
yeah, and I was gonna say I don't really have a quote, so the quote will be my text to you last night that said I'm really struggling to come up with podcast topics, but need to record a bunch of them. And then you sent me the topics. So tell us about it. What do you mean by that?
Yeah. Oh, and my quote, I was just reading the text. There's a autocorrect said why adults should be aware of boy. I have no idea.
Yeah, that was also confusing for me.
Yeah, I didn't even notice. I don't know what I was trying to write, but let me explain. So at my work, I was asked to write a post for our website's blog about kind of why children have a hard time with like what seems to adults to be small changes. And so we're focusing on a child showing up to a classroom where both teachers were out sick, which anyone who works with young children or has young children probably could imagine that the child just, so we have like a hallway and then the classrooms, child's in the hallway and like refusing to go in, just, drops to the floor. There is no way they can go in that room. I'm trying to think, the child's an older toddler, so 2.5, but just, losing it, like no way. It was interesting because the two teachers were gone. All the kids were the same. All the toys were the same. It was the same room. They were eating snack, which is usually a motivator for him, like many toddlers. And yet, they couldn't do it. And so we thought, I was writing this article with Anna McCrae, who will hopefully be a guest soon on the podcast. And she comes more from the mental health field. And so when we were talking about the article, she immediately went into, well, their schema is disrupted. And, me being, a nerd and an early childhood nerd, I was immediately thinking play schema. And I know she wasn't talking about play schema, but
she's talking about the OG schema.
Yeah, the OG schema. But I thought, we were talking about how do we explain this to parents? Because, if you go to a word like schema too quickly, it's like, what?
Yeah.
So we use the metaphor of, for an adult driving to work, and that route is your schema. This is how you get to work. And you do it every day. And the more you do it, you don't even have to think about it. And then a detour happens, or, there's an accident and traffic's way backed up and you can get off this exit. That's suddenly changing what your schema is. And so in a way, what that schema is how your mind is organizing information. So most of it is literally visual, right? You're processing, what does that map look like? And so one thing, if you have no GPS on and you do that, you might be really freaked out. And then it's like you have to turn the radio down because now you're like, oh no, what am I going to do? And so what that's showing is you have emotional distress too. You're like, stressed. You're probably, your heart's beating a little faster. You're breathing a little, shallow. And, as adults, most of us have some emotional regulation that a 2.5-year-old doesn't.
Right.
But it's important that that's happening too. And then the way to calm yourself is to then be able to visualize it again. So if you're able to turn on the GPS and see, oh, okay, I can get there a different way, I see it. Or if you're more familiar, like your schema, if you only knew the one route and don't know the other side streets, then your schema is very narrow. So it's very fragile, which means your emotional distress goes way up. But if you have a wider schema, like, oh, okay, I know these parallel roads. I don't even know the names of them, but I know I'm still going east-west. Maybe I'll look at the compass on the car to make sure, am I still going east? Okay, I am, but the more you can visualize it, and what that's doing is giving that mental picture, like, okay, I'm fine. And so the more you can visualize, the more you can do it. And so with young children, I can see you want to say something right now.
Well, no, I was going to say, this literally just happened to me. I was going to say it, and then I thought, I'll derail him completely, but
no, please derail me.
No, it literally just happened to me the other night. I was trying to drive to this little town south of Lafayette called Crawfordsville, and I was starting from a different place. Like I could get there with my eyes closed, but not really. From my house, but I was out on campus instead, and it's a whole different way. So I had, even with my GPS, I had set it, but it felt like it was taking me back north instead of south. And I literally was trying to be does this look south? And trying to look for clues that it was south. And eventually, got to a sign where I was like, okay, yes, now I know where I am. So it's just interesting that you use that as a metaphor.
Yeah, I think it's one that it kind of has the visuals. And it's, thinking about brain pathways, it's very similar. I remember waking up in Detroit at a hotel. I was right on the river, and I could see Windsor across the river. And I woke up with the sun in my window, and I was like, the sun is rising in the west. What the, and didn't realize that it's one of the few places where Canada is south of the US. So, but like in my brain, and I don't know why it was such a big deal, but it was just like, I wake up and I'm a little disoriented, and I'm like, wait a minute, did I wake up in a different hotel room? Which doesn't happen very often for me, just to be clear.
Okay.
And then realized, there's still time. Bucket list here. Anyways, so it definitely, like, it messes with your mind. And I guess because it was like I was just waking up, my heart was racing. Like, I don't know why that's emotional, and yet knowing where you are actually is, fairly.
If we think about the evolutionary function of our brain, that, waking up in a different place could be a real risk.
Right. Yeah.
So I kind of get it. But this is an example of when you can put something in perspective for an adult way of thinking. That it can really impact the way we might interact with that little boy who was so worried about the new teachers, because our tendency would be to, like, this is weird. This is like your everyday classroom. You're always here.
Right. And the teachers,
everybody in there.
The teachers both had subbed in that room before. The child knew both teachers' names and had, played with them. I'm sure both of them had changed his diaper at some point, so they knew each other. And yet it was not what he expected. It was not what he was picturing in his mind. And so there's the cognitive dissonance of, like, wait, everything in the world has changed.
Right.
My boss said it's actually probably more akin to showing up to work and every single coworker is different, right? For an adult, right? Because that's the way it feels to a kid, of like, who are these people? And everyone else is just acting like nothing's, wrong or whatever, which actually would be a good prank. I don't know how I would do that one, but it
wouldn't work in my office because I never see coworkers.
Oh, that's true. It's got to be in person work. So, but anyways, it's one of those things that, or even when you start a new job and you don't know anybody, and you go in and there's a lot of emotional distress going on because you don't know anyone, and you don't even know what's too formal, what's too informal. Do I just say hi? Do I, like, what's that?
Can I swear here?
Can I swear here? Yeah, that one takes a little while. Well, for some, but yeah, for sure. I actually, that is funny because we have like two co-directors, and the one co-director does not swear, and the other co-director does all the time. And I quickly learned nothing horrible, but the first time, I can't say this word right now with the others in the house, but one of the first times I saw her, we were all wearing masks. It was a few years ago. And I swear she, like I said, oh, hey. And she's coming down the hallway and says, F you. But it was not what she actually said, apparently. And she was so
censoring a bit during this show.
Sorry. That was the censored version. But she then, she never swears. So she's like, it's not just funny because you misheard me. It's like, that word never comes out of my mouth ever. So
anyway,
and I don't know. Anyways, that was my schema. What I expect.
There's your
people to
cognitive
tell me.
dissonance. Yeah.
Okay, so back to the kids.
Yeah.
Yeah, you said the way the adults approach it. So one of the substitutes saw, the mom, and I probably heard the kid crying through the door or whatever, or not crying, but like whining, whatever, like no.
Protesting.
And so she came, she opened the door and she's like, "Oh, hey, it's so good to see you." And used his name. I don't have a pseudonym yet. Oh, in the article I call them Dolores. But
nice.
But it was just like, hey, we're just having snack, and I don't think she named the other kids. Maybe she named the like the best friend, whatever. Carol's here if you want to come in. And then actually in the article I have two characters. The friends are Carol and Murray. I forgot.
Oh, nice.
But anyways, but so she's going right to the fix it.
Yeah.
Thing, right? Of telling him the things that are the same, which is great. I just talked about having that GPS.
Yeah. Helps
you picture, or if you know the roads, it helps you picture what's happening. So she's giving that child mental pictures of, here, and she probably even, I know for another child, the first thing would be, did you want to go look at the truck book? You can go read the truck book, that's the thing. Transition objects work very similarly. Yeah. This is the object you are holding with mom, and now you get to hold it in the classroom. So it's just this thing of going to all these things, talking about the cognitive dissonance. What she didn't do was say it's a little scary when things are different. And I think partly, I think sometimes adults forget to mention the emotion in general, because I think there's a fear, I think we all have this, that if we mention an emotion, it makes it worse, or like the person didn't already think that. Yeah. Right. When someone, like not a close friend, but if someone like an acquaintance loses someone in their life, a family member dies or something, there's that, I don't know if I was going to call her, but what do I say?
Can't say his name.
Yeah. And I don't want to say his name. And, it's that thing of, do you think that she forgot that he died? Like, like you don't have the power there to bring this to the person. The person is grieving. And one of the hardest things when you're grieving is the people who ignore the loss. And yet we naturally avoid it. Yeah. And it's more like we don't want to have to see your grief is what
that's exactly right. It's not that I don't want to upset them. It's that I am uncomfortable with their upset.
Yeah. Right. And so with kids, we do that sometimes. Yeah. And then we think, it'll go quicker if I don't mention it, because then we can, let's be happy, you know. But the other thing I think is that sometimes we forget how little things can cause this, because we forget, because the children's schema is so narrow, that child is crying because, admittedly, the relationship with the caregivers probably is the most important thing, and everything else stems from that. Right. So I don't want to minimize that. If it had been just he got the blue cup instead of the red cup, still might have resulted in crying. Right. But it's a different thing. It is a bigger thing. But still, as adults, we kind of like, well, everything else is the same. Why is this a big deal? Most adults wouldn't say that to the child, but don't want to mention the emotion because it's like, well, that's kind of a silly thing to be sad about. Yeah. But if we look at, think of our own experiences and when things happen that we don't expect. Yeah. And so both the schema is narrow, but also emotional regulation is still developing. So you got the two things, right? Yeah. That anything that makes you feel a little bit like, like you want to just, oh shit. Anytime you want to just say, oh shit, a kid wants to cry and fall to the floor, right? So it's just that we have enough emotional regulation to swear or to whatever. Yeah. Say, well, bless your heart, Bless your heart. And the rest, but a child is going to cry. Yeah. So I think it's sort of like
play, where it's hard for some adults to value play because they're so far removed from all the little discoveries that come through play. Like they don't need that anymore. They've had decades of working through that. And so our brain sort of moves that piece away, and we have more practice with our emotional regulation.
Right. Yep.
So the same thing with this little guy who couldn't, didn't want to face the day with that one change that seems maybe minor to us. It's because maybe because of our improved emotional regulation
and the egocentricity of adults.
And we just don't understand that. So maybe we don't even notice it. It's not that we say, oh, this is some cognitive dissonance leading to emotional discomfort. We think this is this makes no sense. This shouldn't even, it's not that they're saying, well, he's upset, but I don't care. It's that might not even make the connection because we're so far removed from that experience ourselves. So bringing these analogies that you're bringing in is a good way.
Right. Just to remember, how would I feel? Well, even those subs, I think being a substitute, I find it so difficult. The idea that I wouldn't know if I'm like at 6 a.m., I thought, oh, I'm gonna, whatever.
Yeah.
Go on my social media or, go for a walk and like, oh, they want me to be in the classroom in an hour and a half.
Yeah.
I don't know how people do that. And we're a big enough center that our, both of those substitutes, one was actually a supervisor. One was we call them department teachers. We used to call them floats, and that's a more common term, but we wanted people to feel better because float didn't seem like we were treating them as serious as the other people.
Float's very low on the hierarchy.
Yeah. So still, like, they both knew they were going to be in our building, but I'm sure the supervisor had like 100 other things to do.
Right.
But, I've got to be in the classroom with the kids. And so there's this mental shift there. And I'm sure there was even some like, can I say, God damn it?
Yeah.
Yeah. God damn it. I don't know which words is it just the one word we're just not saying? Word. Okay. Good to know. So it was just, it was hard for them too, but again, in a way that clearly they can deal with. I always say when I get called into classrooms, it's often like, hey, can you help out for a minute? It's because someone's like really dysregulated.
Oh yeah.
And the first thing I do, I make sure like I get to the doorway and I take a few breaths and then I walk in, right? Because, and in general, they tell, in emergency rooms, CMT, we just, totally different story, but had a child who had a febrile seizure, so the fire department arrives and I was like outside to meet them, and they like, it's a thing when you watch, they take their time because running in is going to be worse. They are not going to be thinking. They're not going to go to their cerebral cortex, right? They're going to be in that, whatever amygdala stage, that like, or whatever,
lizard brain.
Like, the lizard brain. And so, just watching them kind of come out. Oh, okay. So it's a 3-month-old. It's like, oh no, 3-year-old. Okay. Yeah. Sometimes they get it wrong when they tell us, okay, all right. And where do we go? And, just this really calm and just walking in, and it was just that thing of the person who called 911 couldn't even remember the address of the school.
Right.
And even though I said it, she says the street number, and then she looks at me again, like, what was the name of the street? I'm like, yeah. Again, you come here every day, your schema. I mean, she's fairly new, but still, like, and that's why you do fire drills and things, right? It's, you just get a schema going. So then when the thing happens with more emotional distress, you can follow that schema.
Right.
So anyways, well, I guess you had me on here because I'm going to go all over the place. But...
Yes, please. Please.
But that's, so essentially, like, we just have to remember that, right? With kids and kids get freaked out by fire drills alone, right?
Absolutely.
And that's part of that thing of, I guess that's the thing I wanted to make sure we talk about next is but we want kids to experience this change.
Oh.
And this is stress that they can live through, and we want them to, right? So, you know, too often we don't separate chronic stress from temporary stress. And temporary stress is good for kids. That's why doing risky play is good. We want that heart rate to go up. We want them to feel a little nervous. Right. And still jump off that climber.
Yeah.
And still whatever. And also sometimes realize, nope, this one feels too risky. I'm going to go down a step. Right. We want them to do that. And the same is true of going into a classroom. Yeah.
If I'm hearing you right, we should jump out from behind doors and scare children for some temporary stress, some healthy temporary.
Well,
I know that's not what you're saying.
The good thing is we don't have to, because they're going to be stressed about the blue cup instead of the red cup. Like, you know, it's always that thing. It's like when I teach conflict resolution, I was like, and the great thing is, you know, they're going to learn conflict resolution skills, and you don't have to plan a circle time to talk about it. I mean, you can do like a puppet show to, you know, talk about it when the emotions aren't high. I don't mean that, but I mean like, but then don't, okay, now I taught them.
Right.
It's like, and you don't have to.
Now we'll have no more conflict.
Yeah. And you don't have to go like, take a toy and put it next to someone else and say, hey, took your toy. Heather just
aren't you going to do something about it?
Yeah. Kick her ass. No, but like conflict's going to happen. So, you know, I was like, say, and the great news is you don't even have to plan it. You get to help kids learn how to solve conflicts, because the conflicts will come.
Yeah.
But the same is true with cognitive dissonance. Everything is new to kids, you know, and even like if we have a lot of snow right now in Minnesota, and yeah. Yeah, no, I know. It is nice. But and yeah, and then in a few days it's going to be, well, it's going to get up to 4 degrees, I guess, but it's going to be really cold.
4. Okay.
Yeah, but at least there's snow. I hate when it's that cold and there's no snow.
Yep.
But anyways, back to the story. Oh no, I forgot what I was saying.
I'm so sorry. I did
it's okay.
Too.
We're recording in the morning. This is like, I mean, I know it's not that early in the morning, but
it is.
Yeah. Oh, did you just mute?
I did, because I'm pouring a drink.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I thought it was an accident. Okay. So anyways, back to the cognitive dissonance. Kids are going to have cognitive dissonance. So we don't have to jump out of the, you know, from behind a door. What we can do is help them with that. And so the two things, you know, really the two things you're doing is, one is emotional regulation. And naming the emotion is the start of that. Wow, you're really upset, or it can be scary, you know. And I think scary is a word I honestly learned from Mr. Rogers. I mean, to use that with kids,
right?
Because kids do find things scary.
Yeah.
And I often go to, oh, you're sad or you're mad, but like scary is like what they're often like. It's a little scary when the classroom is different, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, and so I've been using that more, and I do think it's a good word for kids. And again, I think it was my adult centric view of like, well, it's not scary to go into the classroom they go into every day. And it's like, well, yes, it is.
Yep.
And the more you think about that schema thing, right, you know, like that it's changed. And so acknowledging the emotion, you know, mom was hugging the child in this case. And then you know, obviously if the teacher can hug the child. So if it's not about the teacher, if the teachers were there and I don't know what would be different. We had a classroom once that a pipe burst, flooded, so they had to like
to a whole different
overnight
room.
They moved a bunch of furniture over to a different room that was like a community room. It clearly was like way bigger than so it's kind of like, oh, there's a few shelves over there, and then there's like 50 feet before there's another shelf. But you know, there was a kid who really had could not do it. And actually it's in my book, but it's somebody who might be in your book, so I will tell the story a little bit. And so Jenny, with one child who was autistic, who's really like, what's going on? I can't picture it. She's like, let me show you the classroom. And now I can't remember. In the book, it tells us, I think that he couldn't technically go in, So she went in and took photos and showed him what the classroom looked like, and said, that's why we can't go in there. You know? And then I forgot what, he just used a word, and would look at the photos over and over as they went into the new room. And so so this is getting into the cognitive dissonance part.
Yeah.
Photos work great. So it could be like, oh, you're missing, your regular teachers. Yeah, here's their pictures, right? So a lot of classrooms have pictures of the children's families for that same reason, but we often forget to have pictures of the teachers. So when they're gone, like those teachers or caregivers are really important as well. And I was saying, don't forget to have your, your pets, photos of the pets too, because for kids, but it's like that thing, like having a photo. Oh yeah, you really like playing with Heather. She'll be back in a few days. And then and then you go to the things the child can picture. We're still going to have snack. It's going to be a little different though, because I'm going to give second. I don't remember how Heather does it. So I might do it a little differently. You can let me know if you see something different or whatever. And so you acknowledge the emotions first, hugs, whatever, but also give children ways to picture things, to get those mental pictures. So talking about it, when it's something like this where you didn't know ahead of time, you talk about it. If it was going to a new school or a new classroom, you would want pictures ahead of time. You'd want to hopefully visit. Let's go visit your new school, right? And we often do this. And this is why it gives kids a mental picture. At Morgan's Wonderland, what was that called?
I think it was Morgan's Wonderland. Yeah.
In San Antonio, they have it's an amusement park, and they have the car, like before you go in line to get into a car to go on a track, you can go in the car, right?
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Here in Minneapolis, there's an airlines that has once a month, autistic kids and their families can go on the plane, and they have the the people come around to they do the seatbelt thing. They do the whole thing except fly, to give that child the experience. I'm sure they have everyone use the bathroom too, especially the toilet, the volume of that. And I imagine they tell parents, if they have two parents going or two adults, one of you go with the kid after they wash their hands, the other one stay to flush, because you don't know. But they just walk through it.
That's really great.
And just being able to visualize that a little bit, and then verbal reminders, or if you can have visuals, if you go to a new school with your child, take pictures. And then show the pictures after, oh yeah, remember you were playing with the blocks here, and look at it over and over, and then continue to look at the pictures after the child started of oh yeah, it's you're at the new school, and talk about the emotions that were happening. It was a little scary when you walked in. I also know you had fun doing this, and talk about all the range of emotions the child had. Don't focus just on the negative, but also don't ignore the negative. So
I mean, just keeping in line with the Piaget theme of schemas, we I think acknowledge, but then forget it when we're in practice and in the moment, that children don't really develop those really consistent abstract thinking abilities until after 5 years old. So if we're working with children who are younger than 5, they can do some abstract, there is some all of the pretend play is kind of playing with abstract ideas, but we can't rely solely on I told you, I gave you the abstract, and all that you're describing is ways to give them the
concrete. And one thing I guess it's important to acknowledge Piaget, right? That a lot of this came from his thoughts about it, but also acknowledging that he watched his wife care for the kids. And so what he skipped was all the emotional stuff around it.
It's very cognitive.
And so, he's talking about these cognitive things. And I think people and that's why you want to read a lot of different things, right? Because there's also that emotional piece. And I think sometimes people will describe, like I said, the teacher who's just describing the things, she was doing, everything right with that.
Yeah.
Just, added on would be that emotional piece that.
Yeah. So I think that it can connect to the emotional piece.
Yeah.
In that we can say, oh, I see you're sad.
Right.
Even that's sort of abstract, unless we say you're crying, and that makes me
Yeah.
you're sad.
Thank you for saying that. Yes.
And kind of bring even that emotional support into a concrete.
Yep. Yeah, that's true. I didn't say that part, but yeah, for sure. Describing it.
Yeah.
I see you're crying. It's sad.
Yeah.
And that's where I like the word scary, because then you give concrete things too.
Right.
Yeah. Like, it's scary when the teachers are different than what you're used to.
Yeah. That's a good point. Because I don't know, one of my things with labeling emotions, and a 4-year-old taught me this. He was under the table crying because he didn't want to go to something someone was making him go to.
Right.
And I was sitting on the floor by the table talking to him, and I said, I know you're upset. And he's like, I'm not upset. I'm frustrated.
Yep.
And he was so mad at me for mislabeling. So, I mean, I think it's so important to give that language.
Yeah. And I try to say, you look upset, or you
sad,
seem upset.
Yeah. Or, and I think
crying.
that's why I like scary, now that you're bringing that in, is we still acknowledge the emotional impact and the emotions that they're feeling,
right?
But we're not presuming.
Yeah. It's funny. I didn't think about this, but I overheard a family was leaving the center. They're in the lobby. We have a big enough place that we have a lobby. But I heard the mom talking to another mom. She's holding the preschooler, and the toddler is just kind of standing next to her, but she's saying, oh yeah, we're going to go to a hotel. She's still not so sure about it. And you can see the child kind of huddle closer to mom. And I overheard it, and I was walking by, and I was not lying. This was true. I was like, oh, I'm actually going to stay at a hotel on Monday. And mom immediately, oh, so are you excited about it? And I know mom wanted me to jump to the positive, but the first thing I said was, well, it's going to be a little scary because I'm used to my own bedroom. And, like I have a lamp at my, by my bedside, and they'll probably have a lamp, but I don't know.
The sun rises in the east in my bedroom.
Yeah. And what the hell's going on in Detroit? Jesus. But I think then mom right. And she also said, yeah, it will be a little different, but that's why we're just going for one day. Because someday we want to go on longer trips, but we thought it's important to do a one-day trip. And it was fun. Right. So she was realizing what I just said, and the family has the means to do that, although they probably haven't traveled in a while because they have 2 kids under the age of 4. So
and pandemic.
And pandemic, right? So but she was focusing originally, when I overheard it first, they were talking about the pool. There's going to be a pool there, which is a good thing to mention,
right? But
also acknowledge there's going to be some differences.
Yeah.
You're going to be eating breakfast with other people in the room, but there's a waffle maker.
Okay.
So anyways, yeah, I'm sure you will. Right. So anyways, having, and so those are just those small changes. I feel like all of this is true if there's big changes, if there is a death in the family, if there is a, moving, whatever, all those things, they're kind of the same thing. And in fact, one thing I want to just add, even though it's tangential, I do tangential. That's all I do.
How dare you?
I always recommend to people working with young children to always have a book about death, and age appropriate book about death. So Lifetimes is a nice one. The Lighthouse for preschoolers by Robert Munch. Just something. Sophie, I think that's Mem Fox. Actually, Sophie would probably be my favorite.
Oh, I don't know that one.
I don't know how she does it, because it's probably 60 words. It's definitely under 100 words.
Okay.
And talks about the entire life cycle. It starts with Sophie being born.
Okay.
How much Grandpa loved her, and they would hold hands. and then Grandpa gets older.
Oh.
And then she holds his hand on his deathbed, and then they go to the funeral.
Oh.
And then,
okay.
and by this point, Sophie's an adult, and Sophie is a baby. So it starts and ends with babies. And yet, like I said, it's each page, it's like really simple sentence. But either way, have a book about death, something like that. So I'm not, you don't have to have the book about really specific things. There are books for that when it actually happens to a kid.
Yeah.
Or you can create a social story, but something like that where you just read it, put it on the shelf, and then at some point, every single year, I taught in classrooms for 26 years. Every single year, at least one child in my class had a grandma, grandpa, aunt, uncle, somebody passed away. And sometimes someone closer, but, and I would find out before the parents tell me, because the child would go over to the bookshelf, pick up the book, Sophie, and walk over to me. Can you read this? And so then we'd read it. And so what you're doing by reading that ahead of time is you're starting to create that schema around what death is, because too often what we do is we're afraid to talk about it, afraid to talk about it with kids. And then when it happens, it's like you're having to start building that schema right away, and the child has no idea what this is. Tommy DePaulo has a good one too. Nana Upstairs, I think it's called. It's a little longer, so I would only do that for older preschoolers. I'm sure there's newer ones that I just don't know because I haven't been in the classroom in a few years. But anyways, just that idea that it's just, you're creating a schema. It's going to be narrow, but then when the reality happens, they have something to build off of on that. And of course, there's emotional distress. And the other thing I'll add, the one thing about death is that often the parent is grieving also.
Right.
So finding a close friend, someone who can be there for the child. I always suggest, if you're bringing the child to the funeral or memorial service, have an adult that can go with the child, so they can just be for part of it or whatever. But the adult, if it's the parent, is not emotionally available to help the child's emotions. So if you're able to, I think it's great for kids to go to memorial services, but also, with no context, it's a little weird. Or, if you're in a family where your whole extended family's here and they go to funerals a lot, their schema is already there, right? So they might be more able to handle it. If it's like my family where I live, hundreds of miles away from any of those relatives, it's like we're flying in for a funeral. It's a very different experience for my child. So, it depends. But just if you think about it as a schema, that it gets wider as they have more experience, and books are a great way to at least place it there before the actual emotional thing is happening. So I just want to throw that one out there, because I think that's one that, again, we don't want to talk about, therefore we don't. And people think, oh, but we don't want to bring that up to kids. But using the same thing, I'm just going to suddenly, like, that's why we read books about people of other races and other cultures. That's why, that whole idea of the windows and mirrors, is that you are creating schema that experiences can build off of. So, whatever, that's all.
That was a very good.
I've just emptied out.
Job.
My brain is empty again.
Okay, great. That's how Josie.
And so is my coffee cup.
Mine too. That's how Josie used to sign off of phone calls with Grandma.
I've got my UP mug.
Well, I'm empty. It's what?
Pasty.
Oh, pasty. Nice. I just.
And then it has the recipe on the other side in case. Oh,
nice. Just a plain old. Okay. Sounds like we're wrapping up.
I imagine it's been a long time.
We're just showing each other our coffee mugs.
Yeah.
So do you want to plug the blog that this article will be on?
Thank you. So it's stdavidscenter.org. So it's all one word, no punctuation. So ST, not the word saint.
Right. Okay.
stdavidscenter.org.
Yeah.
But all one word. And yeah, it'll be up. Well, I was supposed to finish the article yesterday and I didn't. That's why I texted to talk about it.
Oh, okay.
So I'll finish it next week. So it'll probably go up around the new year.
But there's lots of other there for them to read while they're waiting.
Yeah. There's plenty. And what I like is that our agency has OTs, mental health professionals and things too. So I do stuff around more like early childhood, but
yeah,
then there's also stuff about, sleep or,
yeah.
fine motor from an OT's perspective, and things like that. So
I just think that as a field, we need to get as much OT information as we can, not just our early childhood information. And also you've started a Facebook page for your book and the Facebook page is Inclusion Includes Us.
Yep. Yeah. And then you can read short quotes about it. My goal with it, I really am kind of following Zen and the Art of Early Childhood.
Yeah.
That's the current name, right?
Yep.
And that just changed.
Yes, right. No education.
But I love that it's usually just pretty short things. So I'm trying to just have most days quotes and then like one video a week that you link to, one maybe an article that you link to, maybe, and so it's hopefully the idea that people can just sort of, just shows up in their feed and,
right.
And if you don't know, click like, that way the other feed, it'll keep showing up.
It'll keep showing up. Yep. All right.
And if you start doing that, then you suddenly get these OTs, because I often quote OTs, and then you can start liking those and do what Heather just said. Learn more about
occupational therapy, pediatric occupational therapy.
Yes.
Okay. Well, thanks, Mike. This was fun.
Yeah. Thank you.
Good luck finishing the article.
Yeah. Good luck finishing your book.
Yeah. Thanks. That's the.
I'll finish mine first.
Yeah, I know you will. Okay. Anyway, thanks everybody for listening to another episode, and we'll see you again next week.